The neon sign outside flickered in the growing darkness, casting a blue-red glow across the empty parking lot. Rain pattered softly against the pavement, creating small puddles that reflected the colorful light. Keanu pulled his jacket collar higher as he stepped out of his car, the hood drawn low over his face, a habit he had developed over years of avoiding unwanted attention. He paused for a moment, taking in the small neighborhood bar with its weathered exterior and fogged windows. This wasn't the type of place where people would expect to find him. That was exactly why he had chosen it. The past 6 months had been a blur of camera flashes, interview questions, and exhausting 14-hour days on set. His body ached from the countless stunts and choreographed fights that had become a staple of his recent roles. But it wasn't just the physical toll that weighed on him. It was the constant performance, the perpetual need to be on, that had driven him to seek solitude tonight. A soft bell chimed as he pushed open the door. Warm air rushed to meet him, carrying the scents of beer, fried food, and old wood. Inside, the bar was dimly lit, with most of the illumination coming from small lamps on each table and the soft glow behind the counter. A few patrons looked up briefly before returning to their conversations or drinks. No one gave him a second glance. Perfect. He made his way to a corner booth, far from the windows and tucked away from the main seating area. The worn leather seat creaked as he slid in, his back to the wall, another habit, one that his action roles had only reinforced. From here he could see the entire room while remaining half hidden in shadow. An old jukebox played a Tom Waits song, the gravelly voice and piano creating a melancholy backdrop that matched his mood. On the TV above the bar, a baseball game played on mute, occasional flashes of movement catching his eye. "What can I get you?" The bartender, an older man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, appeared beside his table. He wore a faded band t-shirt under a simple apron and carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who had been serving drinks for decades. "Just a whiskey." "Neat," Keanu replied, keeping his voice low. The bartender nodded, no recognition in his eyes. "You got it." As the man walked away, Keanu felt the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. The anonymity was a gift. Here, he wasn't a celebrity or an action star. He was just another tired customer seeking a quiet moment. The whiskey arrived promptly, amber liquid catching the low light. He thanked the bartender with a nod and took a small sip, letting the warmth spread through his chest. He hadn't realized how much he needed this. Not the drink, but the stillness. The chance to simply exist without expectation. Across the room, an elderly couple sat sharing a plate of food, their hands occasionally meeting on the table. They spoke little but communicated volumes in their comfortable silence. Near the bar, two friends were engaged in what appeared to be a friendly argument about fishing techniques, their hands moving animatedly as they spoke. There was something deeply comforting about witnessing these small, ordinary moments of human connection. On film sets, everything was constructed, the relationships, the emotions, the environments. But here, life unfolded naturally with no director calling cut or makeup artists rushing in between scenes. Keanu took another sip of his whiskey and let his mind wander. The script for his next project sat unread in his bag. His agent had been calling all day, eager to discuss a potential new role that would require him to begin training almost immediately after his current film wrapped. There were interviews scheduled for next week, photo shoots, meetings with producers, an endless stream of commitments that stretched months into the future. But tonight, none of that existed. Tonight, time moved differently in this small corner of the world. The bartender returned, wiping down a nearby table. "Passing through town?" he asked casually. Keanu appreciated the question. It wasn't probing or assuming. "Something like that," he replied. "Needed a break from the road." The older man nodded as if he understood completely. "Well, you picked a good spot. We don't get many travelers here, mostly locals. It's quiet. Quiet is good," Keanu said with a small smile. "Let me know if you need anything else," the bartender offered before moving away, respecting the unspoken request for space. The rain outside had intensified, drumming against the windows and roof. A few new customers hurried in, shaking water from their coats and greeting the bartender by name. The place was beginning to fill up, but not uncomfortably so. The atmosphere remained relaxed, conversations merging into a gentle hum of background noise. A young woman with a laptop sat at the bar, occasionally typing between sips of her drink. A group of construction workers still in their work clothes occupied a table near the door, laughing over shared jokes. An off-duty nurse still in scrubs nursed a beer at the end of the bar, the exhaustion evident in her posture. Each person carried their own story, their own struggles and triumphs, entirely separate from his world of cameras and fame. There was something grounding about that realization, a reminder that most of life happened away from spotlights and red carpets. Keanu finished his whiskey and considered ordering another. The warm buzz had settled into his limbs, not enough to impair but just sufficient to soften the edges of his thoughts. He checked his phone briefly, 3 missed calls from his agent, several text messages he wasn't ready to answer. He turned the device face down on the table. Outside the window, headlights swept across the parking lot as more vehicles arrived. The jukebox had switched to a Johnny Cash song, the familiar voice singing about hurt and redemption. The baseball game on TV had ended, replaced by highlights from other sports. Time seemed to stretch and contract in this place, minutes flowing into one another without urgency. For someone whose life was typically scheduled down to the minute, this formlessness felt like freedom. The bartender returned, noticing his empty glass. "Another?" Keanu nodded. "Please." As the man turned to leave, he added, "And maybe some food if you're still serving." "Kitchen's open till midnight," the bartender replied. "The burger's good. Nothing fancy but honest food. That sounds perfect." When the bartender returned with his second whiskey and a menu, Keanu ordered the recommended burger. As hunger made itself known, he realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten a meal that wasn't from catering or delivered to his trailer. The food arrived steaming hot, a simple burger with crispy fries on a worn plate. It looked nothing like the carefully styled meals he was accustomed to seeing on set or at industry events. This was unpretentious, real food, and the first bite confirmed what the bartender had said. Nothing fancy, but satisfying in its honesty. As he ate, Keanu found himself paying attention to details he might otherwise have missed. The slight saltiness of the fries, the perfect ratio of toppings on the burger, the cold condensation forming on his water glass. These small sensations anchored him to the present moment. The elderly couple was leaving now, the man helping his partner with her coat in a gesture of care that spoke of decades together. The construction workers had grown louder as their empty glasses accumulated, their laughter cutting through other conversations. The woman with the laptop had closed it and was now chatting with the bartender, apparently a regular based on their familiar interaction. Keanu finished his meal slowly, savoring both the food and the atmosphere. For the first time in months, there was no rush, no schedule to follow, no one watching his every move. The constant pressure that had built up inside him, pressure to perform, to meet expectations, to maintain the persona the public had come to expect, began to dissipate. He had almost forgotten what it felt like to be anonymous, to blend into the background of normal life. The characters he played on screen were often extraordinary men, assassins, saviors, heroes with impossible skills and dramatic destinies. But here, away from that world, he could reconnect with the ordinary, the quiet rhythms of everyday existence. The rain continued outside, creating a cozy barrier between this small haven and the rest of the world. Keanu found himself thinking about the moments between the scenes in his own life, the quiet spaces that didn't make headlines or appear in interviews. Those were the moments that sustained him, that reminded him of who he was beneath the roles and the fame. He was contemplating ordering a third whiskey when the door swung open with more force than necessary, letting in a gust of cool rain-scented air. The comfortable murmur of conversation faltered briefly as several heads turned toward the entrance. A group of men in leather jackets stood in the doorway, their presence immediately changing the energy of the room. Water dripped from their clothes onto the wooden floor as they surveyed the bar with an air of territorial assessment rather than casual interest. Keanu watched them from his corner, instinct telling him that the peaceful evening he had been enjoying was about to change. He pulled back deeper into the shadows of his booth, hoping to remain unnoticed as the newcomers made their way to the bar, their heavy boots leaving wet prints on the floor. The quiet evening was over. The 5 men who entered the bar moved like they owned the place. Water dripped from their leather jackets and formed small puddles on the wooden floor, but none of them seemed concerned about the mess they were making. The tallest one, clearly the leader, had a thick beard and arms covered in faded tattoos that disappeared beneath his rolled-up sleeves. A patch on his jacket showed a snarling wolf with blood-red eyes. The comfortable murmur of conversation that had filled the room moments before dropped to near silence. The construction workers stopped mid-laugh, their eyes tracking the newcomers with cautious interest. The nurse at the bar subtly gathered her belongings closer. Even the jukebox seemed to respond to the shift in atmosphere, the song ending with no new track starting up. From his shadowed corner, Keanu watched the group as they spread out. 3 headed directly to the bar while 2 others claimed a table near the center of the room, shoving aside empty chairs with unnecessary force. Their movements were exaggerated, performative, designed to intimidate rather than simply exist in the space. "Hey, old man." The leader slapped his palm on the bar top, demanding attention. 5 beers, and make it quick." The bartender, who had been so warm and conversational with Keanu earlier, now wore a mask of professional neutrality. "Coming right up," he said, his voice even as he began filling glasses from the tap. Keanu recognized the dynamic immediately. He'd seen it countless times, both in real life and in scripts. Men who confused fear with respect, who believed intimidation was the same as strength. On screen, this would be the setup for an action sequence, the calm before the choreographed storm. In reality, it was just tense and uncomfortable. The beers arrived quickly, but instead of taking them to their friends, the men at the bar remained where they were, blocking access for other patrons. The leader took a long drink, then wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Slow night, huh?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. His eyes scanned the room, looking for reaction, for weakness. When the bartender didn't respond, he continued, "Guess not many people want a drink in a dump like this." One of his companions laughed too loudly, the sound sharp and unnatural in the quiet room. The third man was busy eyeing the nurse, who kept her gaze fixed firmly on her drink. The other customers began to shift uncomfortably. The construction workers spoke in hushed voices now, occasionally glancing toward the bikers. The woman who had been working on her laptop quickly paid her bill and slipped out, hunching her shoulders as she passed the group. Keanu remained still, his face partially hidden by shadow. Years of playing characters who lived in dangerous worlds had taught him the value of observation. These men were looking for trouble, but they hadn't found a specific target yet. Best to wait, to watch. The leader finished his beer and slammed the empty glass down. "Another?" he demanded, then turned to survey the room more thoroughly. His gaze landed on the construction workers. "What are you looking at?" he called out, voice raised to ensure everyone heard. The oldest worker, a man with gray at his temples, spoke calmly. "Nothing at all, friend. Just enjoying our drinks." "We're not friends," the biker replied, his tone hardening. "And this is our bar now." The bartender spoke up then, still keeping his voice neutral. "This is everybody's bar. All are welcome as long as they respect the place and each other." For a moment, the leader seemed surprised by the gentle pushback. Then his face darkened. "You giving me a lecture, old man? In my bar?" "Just stating the house rules," the bartender replied, sliding another beer across the counter. "That'll be $6, the biker laughed. "Put it on my tab." "We don't run tabs for new customers," the bartender explained. "Cash or card." The tension in the room thickened. Keanu found himself calculating distances. From his booth to the bar, from the bar to the door, from the bikers to the elderly couple who had returned from the restroom, and now stood uncertain near their table. His body had automatically shifted into a more alert posture, muscle memory from countless fight scenes. But this wasn't a movie. These weren't stunt performers or actors following choreography. Real confrontations were unpredictable and messy. The best outcome would be for these men to pay for their drinks, make their point about being tough, and then leave without incident. The leader pulled out a crumpled bill and tossed it on the counter. "Keep the change," he said with mock generosity, though the amount was clearly insufficient. "Consider it a tip for the valuable lesson in customer service." He grabbed his beer and turned his back on the bartender, a deliberate show of disrespect. His eyes roamed the room again, looking for the next opportunity to assert dominance. They landed on the elderly couple, who were trying to quietly make their way back to their seats. "Well, look what we have here," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "Out past your bedtime, aren't you?" The elderly man, thin but dignified with neatly combed white hair, placed himself slightly in front of his wife. "We're just finishing our evening," he said. "Don't mind us." "But I do mind," the biker replied, taking a step closer to them. "I mind very much when people don't show proper respect." His two companions at the table laughed, encouraging him. The situation was escalating quickly. The construction workers had gone completely silent now, tension visible in their postures. The nurse had slipped off her stool and moved further down the bar, away from the brewing conflict. The elderly woman touched her husband's arm gently. "Let's just go, dear," she whispered, but loud enough for Keanu to hear from his booth. "Leaving so soon?" The biker leader stepped into their path. "But we just started having fun." In the corner, Keanu felt a familiar sensation, a calm focus settling over him like a second skin. It was the same feeling he experienced before complex action sequences, a clarity that slowed the world down and simplified choices. He set his glass down silently and shifted his weight forward, preparing to stand. The elderly man straightened his back, displaying quiet courage. "Please let us pass." For a moment, the biker seemed to consider the request. Then he turned to his friends with an exaggerated expression of shock. "Did you hear that? The old-timer is giving me orders now." One of his companions at the table stood up, knocking his chair back. "Maybe he needs to learn some manners." The bartender moved quickly around the counter, dish towel still in hand. "That's enough," he said firmly. "I'm going to have to ask you gentlemen to leave." The leader turned slowly, his expression darkening. "What did you just say to me?" "I said it's time for you to go," the bartender repeated, standing his ground despite being outnumbered. "We don't want any trouble here." "Too late for that," the biker replied, taking a step toward him. "You started trouble the moment you decided to disrespect me and my brothers." The other bikers had moved closer now, forming a loose semicircle. The elderly couple remained trapped near their table, the woman clutching her purse tightly against her chest. The construction workers had stood up but remained near their table, clearly conflicted about whether to intervene. The atmosphere in the bar had transformed completely from the peaceful haven Keanu had enjoyed earlier. The warm, comforting space now felt charged with potential violence, the air itself seeming to crackle with tension. The leader reached out and grabbed the bartender's shirt front. "I think you owe us an apology, old man. On your knees might be nice." The bartender didn't struggle or attempt to break free, but neither did he comply. He simply stood there, eyes level, refusing to be intimidated. "No one's kneeling in my bar." Something flashed in the biker's eyes. Anger mixed with something else, perhaps surprise at the continued resistance. His grip tightened on the bartender's shirt. Wrong answer. He drew back his free hand, forming a fist. The movement was telegraphed amateur, nothing like the efficient violence Keanu had learned to portray on screen. But it would be effective enough against an unprepared victim. Keanu stood, the motion fluid and deliberate. He stepped out of the shadows of his booth just as the biker's arm began its forward motion toward the bartender's face. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Keanu said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. All eyes turned toward him. The biker's fist froze mid-swing as he registered the new voice, the new threat. His eyes narrowed as he tried to make out the features of the man who had dared to interfere. "Who the hell are you?" the leader demanded, still gripping the bartender's shirt. Keanu took another step forward, moving into the light. His hood had fallen back, his face now visible to everyone in the bar. Recognition didn't dawn immediately. In the tension of the moment, context was everything, and no one expected to see a Hollywood star in this small neighborhood bar. "Just someone who thinks you should let him go," Keanu replied calmly, "and leave these good people alone." The biker's grip loosened slightly as confusion momentarily replaced anger. Something about the newcomer's confidence gave him pause. "This doesn't concern you," he said, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice now. "Stay out of it if you know what's good for you." "I'm afraid I can't do that," Keanu replied, taking another step forward. The confrontation had reached its tipping point. What happened next would determine whether the evening ended in violence or if cooler heads would prevail. The elderly couple, the construction workers, the bartender, everyone held their breath, waiting. The biker leader looked from Keanu to his companions, silently communicating. A decision was being made. Trouble was inevitable now. Time seemed to slow as Keanu stepped fully into the light. The biker leader still had his fist raised, frozen in the moment of decision. The bartender remained in his grip, neither fighting nor submitting. Around them, the air felt charged with potential energy, like the moment before lightning strikes. "I'm asking you nicely," Keanu said, his voice level and controlled. "Let him go." There was nothing threatening in his tone, no challenge or aggression. Just a simple request, delivered with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. His stance was relaxed yet balanced, hands open at his sides. The biker leader's eyes narrowed as he studied the man who had interrupted his display of dominance. Something about the stranger's calm demeanor made him hesitate. "And who's going to make me?" "You." He released the bartender with a small shove and turned to fully face Keanu. "You don't look so tough to me." One of his companions laughed nervously. "Yeah, who do you think you are?" Keanu didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced at the bartender, who had regained his balance and was now backing away slowly toward the elderly couple. "Good. Fewer people in the immediate danger zone." "I'm nobody special," Keanu finally replied. "Just someone who thinks this evening can end without anyone getting hurt." The leader took a step forward, closing some of the distance between them. He was taller than Keanu by a few inches and significantly broader across the shoulders. The tattoos on his arms seemed to shift in the bar's dim light as he flexed his hands. "Too late for that," he growled. "You should have minded your own business." Behind him, his four companions had spread out slightly, creating a loose semicircle. Basic intimidation tactics, making themselves look bigger, more threatening as a group. Keanu had seen it countless times, both in staged choreography and in real confrontations. The construction workers had moved closer to the wall, clearly unwilling to abandon the scene entirely but not eager to get involved. The nurse had slipped behind the bar where the bartender was now standing protectively near the elderly couple. Everyone else had either left or was pressing back against the walls, creating a clearing in the center of the room where Keanu and the bikers now faced each other. "It became my business when you threatened these people," Keanu said, still maintaining his calm tone. "There's no need for this. You can still walk away." The leader's face darkened. "Nobody tells us to walk away, especially not some pretty boy who thinks he's tough." He looked Keanu up and down dismissively. "You've got about 3 seconds to get on your knees and beg for forgiveness before me and my boys teach you a lesson." Keanu sighed quietly. Years of training for action roles had taught him to read body language, to anticipate movement before it happened. The leader's weight was shifting subtly forward, his right shoulder dropping slightly, telegraphing his intent to throw a punch with his right hand. 1. The biker began counting. "Please don't do this," Keanu said, making one final attempt at de-escalation. 2. The leader's right foot pivoted slightly. Another tell. 3. The punch came before the count finished. A wild, powerful right hook aimed at Keanu's face, but Keanu wasn't there anymore. With a fluid movement that spoke of countless hours of fight choreography and martial arts training, he simply wasn't where the fist expected him to be. The biker's momentum carried him forward as his punch met empty air. Keanu had sidestepped with minimal movement, just enough to avoid the blow without backing away. Before the man could recover his balance, Keanu's hand gently but firmly guided the extended arm downward, using the biker's own momentum to direct him off balance. The leader stumbled, more surprised than hurt. He wasn't used to missing. He certainly wasn't used to someone moving that quickly. He began but was cut off as he had to catch himself against a table to avoid falling. The bar had gone completely silent. Even the rain outside seemed to pause in its rhythm against the windows. Everyone was watching now, a collective breath held in anticipation. "Like I said," Keanu offered quietly, "nobody needs to get hurt tonight." For a moment, it seemed like reason might prevail. The leader straightened up, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face as he reassessed the man standing before him. But pride in an audience rarely allow for wise decisions. "Get him," he snarled to his companions. 2 of the bikers moved at once, one charging directly at Keanu, while the other circled to come at him from the side. Their movements were uncoordinated, fueled by anger rather than strategy. The first man reached for Keanu's jacket, hoping to grapple and use his superior weight. Again, Keanu moved with that same fluid efficiency. No wasted motion, no dramatic flourishes. He simply redirected the grabbing hands with his forearms, stepping into the man's space rather than away from it. His palm connected with the attacker's chest, Not a strike, but a firm push precisely timed with the man's forward momentum. The result was the biker stumbling backward into his circling companion, both of them collapsing onto an empty table that cracked beneath their combined weight. The remaining two bikers hesitated, suddenly less certain about their odds. They had expected an easy target, someone who would cower or fight back ineffectively. What they were seeing instead was something altogether different. Movement that spoke of serious training, of body awareness beyond what most people possess. "Stay back," Keanu warned them, his voice still calm despite the escalation. He hadn't raised his hands in a traditional fighting stance. He didn't need to. The leader had recovered his balance and his resolve. Embarrassment and anger had overcome his brief moment of doubt. "You think you're tough?" he growled. "Let's see how tough." This time he came in more carefully, fists raised in a boxer's stance. He had some training of his own, it seemed. He feinted with his left, then came in with a right cross aimed at Keanu's ribs rather than his head. Keanu parried the blow with his forearm, the impact making a dull smacking sound in the quiet bar. The biker followed immediately with a left hook that Keanu ducked under with minimal movement. Each attack was met with just enough defense to neutralize it, no more, no less. There was an economy to Keanu's movements that made it clear he was holding back, using only what was necessary. "Stand still and fight like a man," the leader shouted in frustration as another punch missed its target. Keanu didn't respond verbally. Instead, when the next wide swing came, he moved inside the biker's guard, his forearm coming up to block while his other hand simultaneously gripped the man's jacket. With a subtle shift of weight and a precise application of leverage, techniques practiced thousands of times for film, he used the biker's own momentum and weight against him. The result was as effective as it was controlled. The larger man found himself suddenly airborne for a brief moment, before his back connected with the wooden floor. The impact drove the air from his lungs with an audible whoosh. Keanu immediately stepped back, creating distance rather than pressing his advantage. A glass shattered somewhere in the background as one of the bikers who had been tangled in the broken table finally extricated himself. He pulled a small knife from his boot, the blade catching the dim light. "Brad, no," one of the others called out, but the warning came too late. The man lunged forward, knife extended toward Keanu's midsection. What happened next seemed almost too fast to follow. Keanu's hand intercepted the wrist holding the knife, controlling it while his other hand simultaneously struck the attacker's shoulder, not with his fist, but with the heel of his palm. The precise hit to the nerve cluster caused the man's fingers to involuntarily open. Before the knife could hit the ground, Keanu had caught it with his free hand and tossed it behind the bar, far from anyone's reach. The entire sequence took less than 2 seconds. A collective gasp went through the onlookers. This wasn't amateur hour anymore. What they were witnessing wasn't just someone who knew how to handle himself in a bar fight. This was something else entirely, a level of skill and control that seemed to belong more to the world of film than to reality. The biker leader had regained his feet, but his previous confidence had evaporated. He stared at Keanu with new eyes, recognition finally dawning. "Wait a minute," he said, his voice uncertain. "I know you." Keanu remained silent, still in his relaxed yet ready stance. "You're that actor," one of the other bikers said, the realization spreading through the group. "The one who plays the hitman, the one with the dog." "John Wick," the leader whispered, his face paling slightly beneath his beard. "You're the guy who plays John Wick." A murmur went through the bar as the other patrons made the connection as well. The construction workers were nudging each other, eyes wide. Even the elderly couple was whispering behind their hands. For his part, Keanu simply stood there, neither confirming nor denying. His expression remained neutral, but there was a faint tiredness in his eyes now. The weariness of someone who has had their moment of peace interrupted and just wants it to be over. "Look, man," the biker leader said, his tone completely changed. "We didn't know it was you. No hard feelings, right?" Keanu looked around the bar, at the broken table, the scattered glasses, the knife behind the counter, the frightened expressions of people who had come here for a quiet evening just as he had. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but carried clearly in the silent room. "I think it's time for you to leave." The leader swallowed visibly, then nodded. He gestured to his companions who were already backing toward the door. "Yeah, we're going." "No problem." They retreated awkwardly, stumbling over each other in their haste to exit. No one spoke until the door had closed behind them, and the sound of motorcycles starting up outside confirmed their departure. Then the bartender stepped forward, breaking the spell of silence that had fallen over the room. "Thank you," he said simply, extending his hand to Keanu. The confrontation was over, but its aftermath was just beginning. For several long seconds after the door closed behind the bikers, the bar remained absolutely silent. The only sounds were the distant rumble of motorcycles fading into the night and the steady drumming of rain against the windows. It was as if everyone needed a moment to process what they had just witnessed, the sudden violence and even more sudden resolution. Keanu took a deep breath, centering himself. The familiar post-adrenaline feeling was settling in. A slight tremor in his hands, his senses still heightened. Years of filming intense action sequences had made the physical sensation familiar, but the emotional reality of an actual confrontation was different from anything that happened on a movie set. There were no directors yelling "cut," no stunt coordinators checking if everyone was okay, no medics standing by. The bartender was the first to break the spell, crossing the room with his hand still extended. "Thank you," he said again as Keanu accepted the handshake. The older man's grip was firm, his eyes clear with genuine gratitude. "I've been running this place for 30 years and never needed help like that before." "I'm sorry it happened," Keanu replied quietly. "I just wanted a peaceful evening." A small laugh escaped the bartender. "Funny how things work out." He gestured around at the mess, the broken table, scattered chairs, a few shattered glasses. "Don't worry about all this. It's worth it to have gotten rid of those troublemakers." The elderly couple approached next, the husband supporting his wife's elbow with a gentle touch. "Young man," the woman said, her voice slightly shaky but warm. "That was quite extraordinary." Her husband nodded in agreement. "We've seen your films. My wife is a fan. But seeing you in person," he shook his head in wonderment. "It's something else entirely." Keanu felt a familiar discomfort settling over him. This was usually the part where people started asking for autographs or selfies, where his brief moment of normalcy dissolved back into the reality of being recognized. But the couple surprised him. "We won't trouble you," the woman continued, seeming to read his thoughts. "You came here for peace and quiet, not to be bothered by old folks like us. We just wanted to say thank you." Something in her understanding tone touched him. "It was nothing," he said, then corrected himself. "I mean, you're welcome. I'm glad everyone's okay." The construction workers had begun righting the overturned chairs and collecting the larger pieces of the broken table. One of them called over his shoulder, "That was some movie-level stuff there, man. Just like in your films, but for real." The nurse who had been sitting at the bar came forward with a damp cloth. "You have a small cut," she explained, gesturing to Keanu's hand. "Nothing serious, but you should clean it." Keanu looked down in surprise. He hadn't even noticed the injury. A small scrape across his knuckles, probably from when he blocked one of the punches. "Thank you," he said, accepting the cloth. As he dabbed at the minor wound, he became aware that the atmosphere in the bar had fundamentally changed. The quiet anonymity he had enjoyed earlier was gone, replaced by a kind of reverent curiosity. People were trying not to stare, but they couldn't help themselves. The invisible wall that had allowed him to blend in had crumbled. The bartender seemed to notice his discomfort. "Folks," he called out, clapping his hands once to get everyone's attention. "Mr. Reeves here came in for a quiet drink, not a public appearance. Let's give him some space, all right?" There were murmurs of agreement, and people deliberately turned back to their own tables, though the occasional glance still came Keanu's way. He appreciated the gesture nonetheless. "Can I get you another drink?" the bartender offered. "On the house, of course." Keanu considered for a moment. His original plan for a peaceful evening was clearly no longer possible, but he wasn't quite ready to leave yet either. "Just water for now, thanks." As the bartender moved away, Keanu returned to his corner booth, which had somehow remained untouched during the confrontation. His jacket still hung on the hook beside it, his half-finished drink sitting on the table where he had left it. It seemed like hours had passed since he first sat down, though in reality it had probably been less than 20 minutes since the bikers arrived. The water arrived promptly, along with a small plate of fries that Keanu hadn't ordered. "Kitchen's stress cooking," the bartender explained with a small smile. "Pete back there says it helps him calm down after excitement." "Please thank him for me," Keanu replied. Left alone again, He took a moment to gather his thoughts. This wasn't the first time his training for film roles had proved useful in real life. The choreography, the endless repetition of movements, the understanding of balance and leverage, it all became muscle memory eventually. But he had never intended to use those skills outside of a controlled environment, and certainly not in a public place. His thoughts were interrupted as the jukebox finally came back to life, someone having selected a song. The familiar opening notes of a Tom Petty tune filled the bar, a return to normalcy that seemed to release some of the lingering tension in the room. Conversations resumed, though in more subdued tones than before. The elderly couple was preparing to leave, the husband helping his wife into her coat. As they passed Keanu's booth, they paused briefly. "We come here every Thursday evening," the woman said. "If you ever want a quiet place to sit without being bothered, you're welcome at our table. We're excellent at pretending not to recognize people." She winked, then continued toward the door, her husband nodding in agreement as they left. Keanu found himself smiling at the unexpected offer. There was something touchingly genuine about it, not the excitement of fans meeting a celebrity, but the simple human connection of one person offering kindness to another. The construction workers had finished clearing the broken furniture and were back at their table, though they seemed to be making a conscious effort not to look in Keanu's direction too often. The nurse had returned to her spot at the bar, now engaged in quiet conversation with the bartender. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. Through the window, Keanu could see puddles reflecting the neon signs, the occasional car passing by sending ripples across their surfaces. The world continued its normal rhythms, unaware of the small drama that had played out in this corner of it. He ate a few of the fries, surprised to find his appetite returning. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving behind a familiar tiredness. In a strange way, the confrontation had been almost like being on set. The heightened focus, the practiced movements, the awareness of his body in space. But unlike a film scene, there had been real consequences at stake, real people who could have been hurt. His phone buzzed in his pocket, probably his agent again, wondering why he hadn't returned any calls. Keanu ignored it. That world, with its schedules and expectations, seemed very far away at the moment. A young man in a worn flannel shirt approached the booth, stopping at a respectful distance. "Excuse me," he said, his voice betraying his nervousness. "I don't want to bother you, but I just wanted to say thanks. My dad owns this place." He gestured toward the bartender. "Those guys have been causing trouble around the neighborhood for weeks. Nobody's been able to stand up to them." Keanu nodded, unsure how to respond. "Anyway," the young man continued, "I won't take up your time. Just wanted to say it was cool what you did." He hesitated, then added, "And I loved you in that bus movie." Despite himself, Keanu smiled. "Speed, yeah, that one." The young man grinned, then seemed to remember his promise not to intrude. "Well, enjoy your evening." As he walked away, Keanu felt a curious mix of emotions. The peace he had sought when he first entered the bar was gone, but in its place was something else, a different kind of connection. People still glanced his way occasionally, but it no longer felt like the heavy weight of recognition. Instead, there was a shared experience, a moment of genuine human interaction that went beyond his public persona. The bartender approached again, this time carrying a fresh glass of whiskey. "I know you asked for water," he said, "but I thought you might want this after all the excitement." Keanu accepted the drink with a nod of thanks. "You know," the bartender continued, leaning against the edge of the booth, "most folks who come in here are just looking to escape something for a while. Their jobs, their problems, whatever's weighing on them. I imagine it's the same for you, just on a different scale." Keanu looked up, struck by the man's insight. "What I'm saying is," the bartender went on, "your secret's safe here. Next time you come in, if you decide to come back, folks will be more discreet. Small communities are good at protecting their own." "I'm hardly part of the community," Keanu pointed out. The bartender shrugged. "You stood up for us when you didn't have to. That counts for something." He straightened up. "Anyway, drink up and relax. The excitement's over for tonight." As the man walked away, Keanu took a sip of the whiskey, letting the warm liquid linger on his tongue. The bar had settled back into its comfortable rhythm, though with a new energy running beneath the surface. People talked and laughed, the jukebox played, Glasses clinked against tables. His quiet evening hadn't gone as planned, but perhaps it had given him something he needed even more than solitude, a reminder of why human connections mattered, why the roles he played resonated with people, why stories of standing up against bullies never lost their power. And maybe, just maybe, he had found a place where he could be both Keanu Reeves and just another patron looking for a moment's peace. The revelation wasn't what he expected, but it was valuable nonetheless. An hour had passed since the confrontation. The bar had settled into a new rhythm, not quite the peaceful anonymity Keanu had first enjoyed, but something comfortable nonetheless. Most of the customers had returned to their own conversations, though an occasional glance still came his way. The broken table had been cleared away, the floor swept clean of glass. If not for the empty space where the furniture had been, there would be little evidence of what had happened. Keanu nursed his second whiskey slowly, content to sit in his corner booth and watch the ebb and flow of ordinary life around him. His phone had buzzed several more times, but he continued to ignore it. Whatever Hollywood emergencies awaited him could wait until tomorrow. The bartender approached with a coffee pot, offering a warm-up to a couple seated nearby. After serving them, he made his way to Keanu's booth. "Need anything else?" he asked. "Kitchen's closing in about 20 minutes if you're hungry." Keanu shook his head. "I'm good, thanks." The older man nodded but didn't move away immediately. "You know, we get all kinds in here. Working folks mostly, but occasionally someone passing through who's running from something or looking for something." He set the coffee pot down on the table. "Not often we get someone who's both." Keanu looked up, surprised by the insight. "What makes you say that?" The bartender shrugged. 30 years pouring drinks, you learn to read people. When you came in, you had that look, wanting to disappear for a while. "I get it." He glanced around the bar. "This place isn't much, but it's good for disappearing." "It was," Keanu agreed with a small smile. "Still can be," the bartender countered. "Give it time. People's memories are shorter than you'd think. By next week, you'll just be that guy who stood up to the bikers. A few weeks after that, maybe just another regular." The idea was appealing, becoming just another face in a neighborhood bar, someone who belonged without the weight of recognition. Keanu wasn't naive enough to think it would be that simple. But there was something to be said for having a place where the balance shifted, even slightly. "I might take you up on that," he said. The bartender nodded, satisfied, and picked up the coffee pot. "You're welcome anytime." As the man walked away, Keanu found himself contemplating the evening's unexpected turn. He had come looking for solitude and instead found connection. He had tried to blend into the background and ended up center stage. The contradictions might have been frustrating if they didn't feel somehow right. A reminder that life rarely followed the script you expected. The front door opened, letting in a burst of cool night air. Keanu glanced up automatically, his body tensing slightly in memory of the earlier confrontation. But it wasn't the bikers returning. A young couple entered, shaking water from their jackets. New arrivals, unaware of the drama that had unfolded earlier. Keanu relaxed back into his seat, taking another sip of his whiskey. The liquid had warmed to room temperature, but he didn't mind. There was something soothing about the familiar burn, the simple ritual of raising the glass to his lips. His moment of calm was interrupted by the unexpected sound of motorcycles pulling up outside. Through the window, he could see the reflection of headlights washing across the parking lot. The conversations in the bar faltered briefly as other patrons registered the sound as well. The bartender moved to the center of the room, dish towel still in hand but stance alert. The construction workers exchanged glances, silently communicating their readiness to act if needed. Even the young couple who had just arrived seemed to pick up on the tension, moving closer to the bar and further from the door. Keanu remained seated, watching the entrance. He wasn't eager for another confrontation, but neither was he concerned. If the bikers had returned looking for trouble, they would find the same response as before. The door opened and the biker leader stepped inside, alone this time, without his companions. His expression was different, less aggressive, more uncertain. He paused in the doorway, scanning the room until his eyes found Keanu in the corner booth. For a moment, no one moved. The jukebox had fallen silent between songs, leaving the bar in a state of suspended animation. Then the biker took a deliberate step forward, his hands clearly visible at his sides, empty of weapons or threats. "I'm not here for trouble," he announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. His voice had lost its earlier swagger. The bartender didn't budge from his position. "Then why are you here?" The biker shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable under the collective gaze of the room. "I came to apologize." A murmur of surprise went through the customers. The bartender's eyebrows rose, but he made no move to intervene as the biker continued his slow approach toward Keanu's booth. When he was still a respectful distance away, the man stopped. Up close, he looked younger than he had during the confrontation, maybe early 30s, with lines around his eyes that spoke of hard living rather than age. "I was out of line earlier," he said, addressing Keanu directly. "Me and the boys, we were way out of line." Keanu studied him, trying to gauge his sincerity. "It's not me you should be apologizing to." The biker nodded, acknowledging the point. He turned to face the bartender. "I'm sorry for the trouble we caused. For the damage." He reached into his pocket, causing a momentary tension, but what he pulled out was a worn leather wallet. "I want to pay for what we broke." The bartender looked skeptical but approached to accept the offered money. "This isn't about the table or the glasses," he said. "I know," the biker admitted. "It's about respect." I forgot what that means for a while. He glanced back at Keanu. "Got a reminder tonight." There was an awkward silence as the bartender counted the cash. "This covers the damage," he confirmed, tucking the money into his apron pocket. "But I need your word you won't bring trouble here again." "You have it," the biker promised. Then, to Keanu's surprise, the man pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket. "Actually, there's one more thing. My kid brother, he's a huge fan." He held out the paper. "Would you mind?" It would mean the world to him. The request was so unexpected, so ordinary after the evening's events that Keanu couldn't help but smile. He gestured for the man to approach. "What's his name?" "Tom," the biker replied, passing over the paper and a pen. "He's 12. Wants to be a stuntman because of your films." As Keanu signed the autograph with a personal message for Tom, he noticed the biker's demeanor had completely transformed. The aggressive posturing was gone, replaced by an almost boyish awkwardness. "Listen," the man said, accepting the signed paper with careful hands. "What you did earlier, that was something else. I've been in plenty of fights, but I've never seen anyone move like that." He hesitated, then added, "It wasn't just the fighting, though. You could have really hurt us if you wanted to, but you didn't." Keanu shrugged. "That wasn't the point." "Yeah, I get that now." The biker folded the autograph carefully and tucked it into his inside jacket pocket, as if storing a treasure. "Anyway, I won't take up more of your time. Just wanted to make things right." As the man turned to leave, Keanu spoke up. "What's your name?" The biker looked back, surprised by the question. "Dave." "Dave," Keanu repeated. "There's a stunt training program for at-risk youth in the city. Professional coordinators teach basics, help kids channel energy in better ways. Your brother might be interested." He pulled a napkin from the holder and wrote down a name and number. "Tell them I suggested you call." Dave accepted the napkin with a look of genuine gratitude. "Thanks. I will." He nodded once more to the bartender, then headed for the door. The bar remained quiet until the sound of his motorcycle faded into the distance. Then, as if a spell had been broken, conversations resumed, the jukebox started up again, and the normal flow of the evening continued. "Well," the bartender said, stopping by Keanu's table. "That's a first." "People can surprise you," Keanu replied. "That they can." The older man shook his head in wonder. "You know, most guys in your position would have pressed charges, made a scene, gotten their bodyguards involved." Keanu took a final sip of his whiskey. "Not really my style." The bartender smiled. "I noticed." As the man moved away to serve other customers, Keanu found himself reflecting on the strange turns the evening had taken. He had come seeking anonymity and found himself more exposed than ever. Yet somehow he felt more at peace than when he'd arrived. His phone buzzed again. This time he pulled it out and looked at the screen. His agent had called 6 times, and there were a dozen text messages about tomorrow's schedule, publicity arrangements, contract negotiations, all the machinery of his public life spinning on without him. With a decisive movement, he turned the phone off completely and slipped it back into his pocket. Those concerns belonged to tomorrow. Tonight belonged to this unexpected moment of genuine human connection. He signaled to the bartender for the check. On the house, the older man insisted when he approached. Both the drinks and the entertainment you provided? Keanu shook his head. I appreciate it, but I'd rather pay my way. He placed several bills on the table, well above the actual cost of his drinks and food. Consider the extra a contribution to the furniture replacement fund. The bartender accepted with a nod of understanding.
You heading out?
Yeah, Keanu said, sliding out of the booth. Early morning tomorrow. As he put on his jacket, he looked around the bar one more time. The construction workers raised their glasses in a silent salute. The nurse at the bar gave a small smile. The young couple who had arrived after the confrontation were absorbed in their own conversation, unaware of the minor celebrity in their midst. It was, Keanu realized, exactly what he had been looking for when he first walked in, a place where he could be both seen and unseen, recognized but not defined by that recognition. The contradiction somehow made perfect sense now. At the door, he paused and turned back to the bartender. Thanks. The older man tilted his head questioningly. For what? Keanu gestured vaguely at the room, encompassing everything that had happened. For this. For a place worth defending. The bartender smiled. See you around? Yeah, Keanu replied, and found that he meant it. See you around? He stepped outside into the cool night air. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving the parking lot glistening under the streetlights. His car waited where he had left it, a mundane anchor to the world beyond this small neighborhood bar. Tomorrow he would return to being Keanu Reeves' movie star. There would be cameras and questions, contracts to sign, lines to memorize. But for now, in this moment between worlds, he was simply himself. A man walking to his car after an unexpectedly meaningful evening, carrying with him the reminder that sometimes the most important roles we play are the ones that no one scripts for us. He smiled to himself as he started the engine. John Wick might be fiction, but the connections formed tonight, those were real. And in the end, that made all the difference.